Mrs. Wilson heard the other party's words, and she felt as if she was struck by lightning. "Just stand on the spot," she said helplessly and begging. "Two brothers, please call Mr. Regnar and say that our family is exhausted now. I beg him to show mercy and leave us a little escape. Leave the Bentley to us." After speaking, she quickly added, "Even if you just borrow us to use it for a few years." The other side said blankly, "I'm sorry, Mr. Regnar said that a family like yours really can't come to the table, so he doesn't want to have any interests or entanglements with you anymore. The villa allows you to live in, it is already his. The greatest kindness. If you don't know what is good or bad, then I'm sorry, the villa, he can also take it back at any time." Mrs. Wilson's heart throbbed for a while, but at this time, she did not dare to say any rebellious words. Wendy on the side couldn't help choking. "Please tell Mr. Regnar again, you two, look at the way my dad and my brother are now, our family has no credit in hard cash, and there is fatigue without hard work." The other party said coldly, "If you are still talking so much nonsense, then the villa is really gone." Mrs. Wilson hurriedly said at this time, "Wendy, stop talking. Get out of the car, hand over the keys quickly." Wendy was extremely angry, but she did not dare to continue to resist, so she cried and took out the car key and handed it to the other party. The man took the key and said to the Wilson family, "Okay, the ambulance has been arranged for you. Your family of 5 should go back quickly. We will drive away now." After speaking, the two got into the Bentley car and directly started the car to leave the scene. At this time, an old ambulance drove to the family and stopped. The driver lowered the window and asked, "Are you going to Thompson?" "Yes." Mrs. Wilson nodded sullenly and said, "Thank you, please take the 4 of us to Thompson A06. The driver and a young man in the co-pilot got out of the car and helped them lift Noah and Harold up there, and then said to Mrs. Wilson and Wendy, "You two will squeeze in too." Mrs. Wilson nodded and said to Wendy, "Wendy, this ambulance is a bit tall, please help Grandma." Wendy wiped her tears, rubbed her red eyes again, choked up and said, "Okay, Grandma." Horia hurriedly followed, and said flatly, "Mom, I will help you too." Mrs. Wilson opened her hand and yelled angrily, "Get out. Don't touch me." Horia didn't expect that the old lady suddenly got angry with her, and asked a little aggrieved, "Mom, where did I offend you?" Mrs. Wilson gritted her teeth and cursed, "You have offended me everywhere. If it weren't for you, our family wouldn't be what it is today. If it weren't for you, they wouldn't be able to beat you up for more than 10 million. If it wasn't for you, Noah will not always be ridiculed by Elaine. If it weren't for you, Noah would not be able to do anything to Elaine. He and Harold are so miserable now, this is all your harm." Horia cried all at once. She was also extremely aggrieved in her heart, crying and said, "Mom, I know you have been worried about my pregnancy in the black coal mine, but I was really trying to survive, otherwise, I might have already died. Furthermore, the 10 million things I did not deliberately want to get rid of. I intended to deceive Elaine's money and villa, so as to improve the living conditions of our family. All my efforts and sacrifices are all for this family." When Mrs. Wilson heard her talk about pregnancy, she immediately felt as if she had been slapped twice, and immediately yelled, "You shameless B***tch, dare to mention pregnancy. Depraved family style, depraved morals, and extremely shameless. Had Regnar protected you, I would have driven you out of the house." With that said, Mrs. Wilson was so angry that she even lost her breathing rhythm. She gritted her teeth and said, "Also, when you came out of the black coal kiln, you were not only pregnant with a wild species. You also contracted a venereal disease. You also infected my son. Do you think I don't know?" Horia's face turned red. Just when she didn't know how to fight back, the driver asked impatiently, "I said your family can't leave. If you want to fight, pull the 2 sick numbers from the car and accompany you. Noisy, we are still waiting to get off work, we have no time to spend with you here." When Mrs. Wilson heard this, she immediately persuaded him, and hurriedly said, "Mr. Driver, don't be angry, let's go, let's go." After speaking, she gave Horia a fierce look, and then with the help of Wendy, she climbed into the ambulance. Although Wendy sympathized with her mother, she didn't dare to speak up at this time, so she could only wink at her mother and let her get in the car before talking. Horia also knew very well that she had no other place to live except the Thompson A06 villa, so she could only swallow her anger and got into the car, and sat in the corner. After all 5 members of the family got into the ambulance immediately went to Thompson. In the car, Noah was lying on the mobile hospital bed, looking at Mrs. Wilson, crying and asking, "Mom, what can we do in the future? Our family is now as poor as it is." Mrs. Wilson wiped her tears, and said in extremely painful and melancholy, "Don't know what to do. Now our family has no money, and your father is injured like this again. Later treatment, medication and rehabilitation. It's a lot of money, it's really desperate situation." Harold cried and said, "Grandma, if you want to return to Thompson to see if there are valuable things, let's get them out and sell them. There are still a lot of good things in our villa, just in the wine cellar. It is estimated that you can sell the liquor for a lot of money." Mrs. Wilson nodded. "There is really no way, it can only be this way." Wendy asked at this time, "By the way, Grandma, the 2 people just said that Ragnar arranged 3 helpers for our family. Where are they?" Mrs. Wilson was also at a loss. "Don't know, he may have arranged but people haven't arrived yet, right, hey?" Wendy sighed. If he could send 3 helpers over, Ragnar would be more or less conscientious. Otherwise, Dad and brother would be hurt like this, just the 3 of us. It's really hard to take care of them, who wouldn't say? Mrs. Wilson said with emotion, "I guess Ragnar is indeed angry with us in his heart, but he should still have some hope for us, but he is now no matter how angry we are. If we have a chance in the future, we must perform well, and we should be able to win his trust again." Wendy nodded and sighed, "Hey, I hope the 3 helpers he arranged will arrive as soon as possible. It's best to have already arrived at the Thompson first grade waiting, otherwise we don't know how to get Dad and brother back to the room later."